On today's show, we have Adam De Silva. He's a director and a founder of the production company Explore Impossible. We talk about moving into motion away from stills, treatments, and working with larger teams while still remaining flexible. It's a super interesting chat full of really, really good inside knowledge. So please get yourself a drink, get yourself comfortable, and let's enjoy.
Cue loud mouse click.
Loudest, you, honestly, I swear you've got the loudest mouse. I'd love to see the size of it.
It's huge.
Like, massive.
Huge.
I can only imagine. Well, I can see it. It is massive. For all the listeners at home, biggest mouse on the planet.
You should see the balls inside the mouse. It's the size. It's the size.
Is it
of
like
a
the
beach
Indiana
ball.
Jones? Is it like the Indiana Jones trying to running away from it? Yeah. Anyway, how are you?
Yeah, not too bad. You sound like you're still not recovered from, or is this just now your voice?
This is. I feel like now,
Mr.
as we're
Benson
a couple of
and
weeks
Hedges.
later. Yeah, right. I do. Well, I feel like we're a couple of weeks later. This is now my permanent voice.
Yeah, this is what Clubhouse has done to you.
Yeah, this is it. I've never had social media affect me in this kind of way.
I mean, Clubhouse does sound like the name of a brand that a good cigar company would have had.
It does, doesn't it?
You want a good time?
Monte
Smoke a
Cristo,
Clubhouse.
have a Clubhouse. Yeah, either that or some kind of product placement in the Truman Show.
So, you've obviously not lessened your addiction to that medium. Is it the new big thing in your life?
It is. It's the biggest thing in my. No, it's not. Obviously, my child is, but it is.
But a close second.
A close second. It's great. I still love it. Chatting to people from all over the world. Poor Shona, yeah, right. She's upset. She's on it though, so she loves it as well.
She's coming in third at the moment, mate. That's not cool.
Clubhouse is the fourth most important thing in my life. No, honestly, it's cool. The trouble is, what I've learned is that you have to, when you go into a room, you kind of have to be like, right, who's speaking? Because there are some people who they might not necessarily be not worth listening to, but they might not be as experienced, but they might be very good at talking themselves up, is what I've learned. And it still absolutely blows my mind. I had this wonderful thing where we were chatting in a room, not me and you, but I was chatting in a room, and an American told me that me as an Englishman had butchered the English language. And then he kept talking about his niche. And I was just like, I know we covered this in the last episode, but
it's still annoying you.
it still is absolutely grating my goat.
Well, I think the thing with Clubhouse that's kind of interesting, and as you said, it's not. I mean, it's obviously early days for it. Is obviously you can find groups where you're going to get quality chat, and then there are going to be groups that are kind of a bit random, and you jump in and maybe they're not so good. But I mean, obviously, that's where Exposed Negative comes to the rescue, because we only have quality chat in ours, right?
Yeah. That was said with so much confidence, wasn't it?
Yeah. Well, I mean, we basically are planning to make ours more regular. So, I mean, to the listeners out there, if you are on it, then you can find us. We're both on there under our individual names rather than an Exposed Negative moniker just yet. So if you follow either one of us, you should be kind of what's the word?
Familiar?
No. My mind's gone totally blank. It should be flagged when we're doing something, basically.
Oh, there we go. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, hopefully.
It's been a long morning.
It has been a long morning. We're pumping these out. It's it's been a long week.
We're planning on doing another frequently asked question episode. Tom and Greg give a fact. So we want your questions. We want your questions. So write in to the PO box. And yeah, if you message us with either email or send stuff over on Insta, we'll try and do an entire episode devoted to your questions. Make them specific if you can. Specific questions are easier to answer than general questions, but and you don't have to limit it to one, but try to keep it under 10. or 5.
But yeah, please do send your stuff in. Obviously, whilst it gives us stuff to talk about, it is, one of the main reasons we started this podcast is to try and help. So, and if you feel like you want to ask a question, but you don't want to get, your name attributed to it. So if you want to ask anything, but just tell us in the message that you would like it to be anonymous, and we'll not read your name out. And you can ask whatever, even if you're the world's most experienced pro and you've got a super basic question that really you think you should know the answer to, but you're a bit embarrassed to ask, there is zero judgment here. Send it in. Just let us know you don't want your name in it, and we will do our very best. Well, we will do our best. We will not include your name in it. That is an ironclad guarantee.
Yeah.
But if you do want your name in it, just don't put that. That's also an ironclad guarantee. Look at me, just dishing out these ironclads all the time.
Today's episode has actually come off the back of a few of the questions that we've had. We've had quite a few questions from photographers interested in transitioning across to video. And so as a direct response to that, we went out and sourced a guest that we thought would really do a good job of answering some of those questions and giving you kind of some guidance or through line that you can potentially follow in your own careers if that's something you're interested in doing or something you're thinking about doing. So,
and he's a bloody nice guy. So
really nice guy. I think without further ado, we should probably get into it because it is a long one. So enjoy, guys. This week on the pod, we are delighted to be joined by director and founder of Explore Impossible production company, Adam De Silva. Adam transitioned into shooting moving image after a career in stills, and we've put him on today to talk about that move and all that was involved. So, Adam, welcome to the show.
Hello, thanks for having me.
Full disclosure from the top, we used to be in the same studios, didn't we?
We did.
Many moons ago.
A long, long time ago. Well, we say we were in. I was barely ever in the studio.
We those days are past. You've moved on. You've left. That's fine. I'm not bitter. Talk us through a little bit about kind of your background. So you were predominantly a kind of advertising commercial stills photographer. And then you transitioned into setting up in Explore Impossible, which is a production company. And now you direct and you produce films for, big brands. So, talk us through a little bit of your backstory.
I always find it interesting when people ask this because back in the day, mine felt like a really odd way to get into the industry, and now it seems like there's so many different ways in, and as I've progressed and learned, there is loads of ways. But mine was basically, I always knew my dad was always into photography, so like growing up I used to sneak upstairs to his bedroom and like take out his Contax camera and build it, and was always like sort of obsessed with that and always playing with that, and then sort of always loved it. And then my parents bought me a film camera, like a Nikon film camera, and I started shooting more and more on that. And then by this point, my sister was studying photography at A-level, and obviously she's a little bit older than me. So I just picked it up from there and got really into it. And then I went and did A-level photography. But actually, wind back a little bit, previous to that, I was shooting a lot of skate videos with my friends. So I used to skateboard a lot and was always out shooting skate videos and making stuff. And then got really into, I was in a band and I was really into music videos. And at the time I was studying GCSE media studies, and I said to the lecturer, who was also the photography lecturer, and I said, I really want to, when I grow up, I really want to shoot music videos. And he was like, no, you don't want to do that. No, absolutely not. That's not a career. You do not want to do that. You'll never make money making video. So you should probably look into photography. So I was like, okay. And went into photography and did that and absolutely fell in love with it. Like spent every minute I could in the dark room, and then was still sort of deciding what I wanted to do at university. Knew I wanted to be photography, but I didn't know exactly what area, because my sister had studied fine art photography, and I always felt like that wasn't for me, and I didn't really have an interest in that side of things. And then I was still studying media studies at A-level, and I saw this, we were looking at this old Bernardo's campaign, this like classic Bernardo's campaign, stills shoot. And in it, there was this shot of this baby in an alleyway. It was like a comp of this baby in an alleyway. And it said like John Donaldson, 23 or something. And it was a shot of him like shooting. They'd shot it so it looked like the baby was injecting himself with a needle, like sat in this alleyway. And so I remember I ripped the page out of the textbook and I took it home and I said to my mum, I was like, I know what I want to do. And like, I showed her, I was like, I want to do this. And she was like, what, babies with heroin?
What?
And I was like, no, I want to make like interesting images like this for like magazines and adverts. And she was like, oh, okay, cool. And then from there, started researching it a bit and found the editorial and advertising photography course in Cheltenham. Big up Cheltenham, and so the University of Gloucestershire, and then I went and studied that. Luckily, managed to get on. I think they must have just had a lapse in judgment on the day. The guy who interviewed me was like really fluey, and they let me in, and I went and did that, and I absolutely fell in love with it, and it just further reinforced that I wanted to work in advertising and like commercial work, and so I did that, and then. Worked my arse off really, which isn't normally like me, but so I knew that I was really passionate about it. And then at my graduation show, I met a guy who worked at he owned an agency in London, and they were like a creative agency that specialized in experiential for big brands and stuff. And so he said, oh, we've got a job going as a junior photographer. And do you want to try out for it? And he said, but full disclosure, you're up against like 4 other people, and we really want a girl, and you're the only guy. And to be honest, we're only interviewing you because to tick a box, basically to tick a box. And I was like, oh, okay, cool, that's fine. So I went down and did the interview and managed to get the job, and went in as a junior photographer in there straight from the off. And so weirdly, never did the whole assisting route. And went in, and straight away from the off, I remember like the first day they sent me off on like a cancer research job up in Manchester, and then I had to get the train across to go and shoot this thing for Sky, and so it was really exciting, and it was a hell of a like baptism of fire. But I was really lucky. I was sort of following in the footsteps of people who had done really well off the back of this agency role, people like Brent Sturton and Lee Von Biss. So Levon basically left and I replaced, and then the guy, Pat Stolen, stepped up into senior and I went in as a junior and worked my way up from there, and was there for like 4 years. And then I got made redundant, and I was like, oh, fuck, what am I going to do? How am I going to survive? And like, I'm not ashamed to admit, I remember ringing my mum and dad like in tears, being like, I'm going to have to leave London. Like I can't stay here and I can't do it. And my dad was like, you've always wanted to do it for yourself. Like, just go for it. And I was like, yeah, do you know what? Sod it, I'll try it. And just jumped into freelancing. And luckily, obviously being embedded in an agency, people jump around from agency to agency. I'd already got, and I didn't realize I'd already got a network of people, and pretty much instantly work just started coming in from there, and started shooting more and more. And then did stills. I'd sort of dabbled in motion at the when I was working at the agency, and then shoot stills, and then off the back of that started shooting a bit of video off the back of jobs, and then that started to snowball and pick up speed, and I was getting more, and I was getting booked more for video rather than photography, and photography was like a little add-on. Oh, can you do some stills as well? It was sort of weird, and but I instantly just connected with video a lot more. And I think having worked as a stills photographer for so long, I felt like that was, for me, it was a really lonely existence, and I missed, I don't know, looking back, I missed that tribe and that team aspect of it. And then I sort of found that in video, and that almost family vibes, and lent into that. And I quickly was, doing more and more of it. And I realized very early on that I couldn't fully give myself to directing and being a photographer at the same time. And other people may disagree, but for me, I had to sort of take a step back and think like, I can't focus on the bigger picture of directing like a narrative story and be shooting the stills at the same time, because I couldn't separate the two. Even though it'd be like put the camera down and like now grab the stills camera and shoot that. So I made an active effort to sort of step back and just focus on directing, and still shoot stills, still do a lot of stills, like commissions. There's still a lot of travel work and stuff, but I don't really push that. It's very much the directing.
And how does, I mean, that's it's interesting that you've made that conscious choice, because I think a lot of photographers who do moving image kind of struggle with the fact that and are probably reluctant to take it on jobs sometimes where you're asked to do both, because you know that one is going to suffer. You know, like it's very difficult to get your best work if you're having to split your creative mind in two to do, okay, focus on the moving and then focus on the stills in a short space of time. Like there are ways to do it, but quite often the odds are stacked against you in terms of what the client needs, and you know that things are going to suffer. And more often than not, the client might not even see the kind of things that you see that you think you wish you'd been able to spend more time on. But it still, I mean, we've all been in those situations as photographers where you've gone, I wish I was doing one or the other, rather than having to kind of make both work in a way that I'm not 100% happy with. But so, I mean, I'm interested then to see, you know, what, obviously moving aside and saying, right, I'm going to direct. How did you then kind of build up find people? Because, I mean, working as a team, you've got to create a great team. So talk us through kind of that side of things and creating a team, finding people around you with the skills to kind of develop that.
So in the early days, it was kind of weird. Like I met a group of guys through, so I reached out to a guy on Vimeo. I had this commission to shoot something for an outdoors brand, and with like this adventurer explorer guy, and I knew from the off that I just wanted to direct that, and I didn't want to shoot the stills and try and direct the video. So, but at this point, I had stepped away. I'd also realised that my skills did not lie in camera operating. And so I knew that I needed a DP. Like it's just not my forte. Like as a photographer, I'm super comfortable shooting, and I'll still operate on jobs. I'll still operate a camera if needs be. And sometimes when like I'll be conveying to a DP what I want, and they're like, sometimes I can't get it across. Sometimes I'll be like, do you mind if I just take the camera? And I'll operate occasionally, but it's super rare. And so I knew that I needed a DP. So I basically found this guy on Vimeo, reached out to him. And he came and met me, but he also brought all of his basically his crew that he worked with, and they were all sort of Northampton based as well. So it was kind of weird because I was always down in London, and then met these guys that were still creating this amazing work, but they were outside of the London network. And for me, I'd never really thought about that. I thought everything was so London centric, and basically, he from there met a few guys, and worked with a few of these guys. He introduced me to a couple of other camera operators and whatnot. And basically, when it came to doing the job, he wasn't available, so he introduced me to this other DP and his crew, and I just got on really well with those guys. And weirdly, one of those guys was Josh Money, who I started Exploring Possible with, and yeah, we worked together from sort of day one on jobs, and I really liked him. And he was super talented and super young. He was like 18 at this point, and just crazy talented. And yeah, we started working together more and more. So like finding crew, it's sort of for me, it's an organic process, and it's sort of recommendations of, it's people seeing that people have worked with this person. And if I've worked with someone and I see that like, oh, they get on well with that person, then they'd fit well on my set. And for me, it's with crew especially, and with anyone, it's finding the right people to vibe off on set and not having people that clash. So everyone I like to have a sort of certain chilled, relaxed atmosphere, and we can joke and mess about, but still everyone's like laser focused on what we need to accomplish and get done. And so I've sort of managed to over the years find crew that sort of work that way. But then as you step into the bigger jobs, you basically, it's just down to recommendations and also looking at like crewing websites and finding people off there.
Mm-hmm.
Nice. And how do you kind of keep your ship kind of organized when it's like that? Because you must have different skill sets, I guess, is what you need, because you need somebody who's a type producer who can kind of keep everything in line and in check. You also need the creative. And I mean, this is for stills photographers, you know, if you're working on ad jobs, you'll be working with producers and what have you. But for a lot of editorial or personal projects, you're doing everything. And let's face it, you're never going to have, you might have broad skills, but you're never going to be the world's best producer or the world's best this and the world's best shooter in the world. You know, like this, it's just too much for one person to have. Whereas now you can kind of split that and you can have a team that you're like, they're a shit hot producer, they're a shit hot DP, you know, they're a shit hot sound guy or sound girl. You like, it's, you know, it's good in that sense. But what's your role kind of evolved into? Have you had to take on kind of more of, say, organizing the business side of things? Is there stuff that you've had to learn and develop in yourself to be able to be successful?
Yeah, I mean, definitely I've had to take on more of the reason why I started the production company, like why me and Josh sort of said, let's make this and make it happen, was I wanted to grow. It just felt like a natural progression, really. And it felt like a good time to come together and start something that was bigger, that could be bigger than just us. And it meant that I could work on bigger jobs and also not have to do everything myself, but it also freed me up to work on the business. So not just doing the day to day, and doing all the doing and all the producing. But that's not to say, I mean, at Explore Impossible, we are all multifaceted, and we don't like, we can all do a lot of different things, and we're equally all quite good in certain areas. We specialize in others. Like, definitely Josh is great in the camera department, and he's like our head of production, and he basically runs the show, and I just sit there and pretend that I know what we're talking about a lot of the time. But no, it's I think starting Explore Impossible, like I say, it freed me up to focus on the bigger picture. Like career wise, it freed me up to be able to focus on not being so on the tools and being able to see the bigger picture. Like when we're on set, I can just do my role as a director. But in a company sense, it freed me up to, okay, now I've got more time to go and look for work in this area or in this area. And I can, I find that sometimes I was so busy before doing all the doing that I got my head sort of stuck in the sand. And before you knew it, you were down this rabbit hole going in this direction that you didn't want to go at all. And you were sort of trapped and you were getting the same sort of jobs and the same sort of work. Whereas now I feel like I can sometimes take a break because I know that other stuff's getting handled, and I can take my head out of the sand and be able to work on all the, like, be able to go, okay, right, maybe we need to stop focusing on this, and we need to go back to the DNA of what we were when we started the company and go down this route now. Hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah, I think it's a common mistake by people starting out as well, in terms of when it comes to pricing and stuff, is that people end up trapping themselves, because unless you're costing your work correctly, you can end up chasing the jobs just to keep afloat. Whereas obviously, if you are in a situation where you want to be able to have the time and the space to actually find the type of work you're doing, you ideally want to be doing less jobs for more money rather than as many jobs as possible for not very good rates. And there's always that transition period in people's careers where they kind of get to that point where they make that shift, or they come to that realization. And I think that makes a massive difference if you can actually say, you know what, I'm prepared not to get all the jobs I'm going for, and I'm going to go for these bigger jobs, because that's how you're going to get the biggest clients. But also, you know, those jobs, I mean, you shot something recently for the PlayStation 5 launch, and you were saying it was like 6 weeks of production. And then obviously during a pandemic, you're directing all this stuff across the world, across multiple countries. You're having to direct that remotely. I think you had teams in like Brazil and Korea and all over the place that you were directing from the UK. 6 weeks of production, that's going to be all you're going to be doing for those 6 weeks. And that's going to be full on. But I guess some people, when they're starting out, they don't necessarily think of production as part of the job. You know, they make the mistake of thinking, okay, it's going to be a couple of days of shooting, and pre-production is massive. And I see that a lot in photography as well. People not considering that pre-production is actually part of what they should be costing. They don't seem to understand that it's important.
I made a note sort of before this it's sort of funny to talk about this, because when you compare the two industries, I feel like, and maybe this was just me not being a great photographer, but I feel like the pre-production is far more valued in motion and it's a big part of the process. Whereas in stills, it feels like sort of, I've sort of got an idea of what I'm going to do, and I know what kit I need, and I'll book the crew that I need, and I just sort of, that for me, I used to sort of just rock up to jobs and sometimes even just wing it, and just not even go there with a plan of what to do, and sort of just wing it on the day, and not on the bigger stuff, but on more the editorial stuff. Whereas now pre-production, I would say I'd say it's like 90% of my job is in there, but I love it for that as well, because I get to work, again, like I said, like the collaborating with people and leaning on other people and looking at other department heads and getting their input on something, and it not just being sort of my vision all the way through. Like I'm not amazing at looking at how to use, like, let's say, like, to use color palettes and like costume and getting them to work together. Whereas like I can go to a DP and get their input, and they make it so much better. I remember reading a business book like growing up, and it was like, if you want to be good, surround yourself with people that are better than you. and that's what I did as a photographer. I just surrounded myself with people that were better than me at lighting, and they would help me and lift me, and I learned so much off them. And the same thing applies even on the bigger jobs. It still applies the same way. Like, just find people that can help make your craft better and build that way.
Do you think the kind of the less emphasis on pre-production for stills is due to it just being a smaller team?
I think it's smaller team, yeah, but I also think, I don't know,
because I guess on moving image, huge, much larger teams. You know, we're talking 20 people, whereas on the stills there might just be the photographer and an assistant.
Yeah, I think it's also, I don't know if it's a mindset thing in the industry that even on some of the stills jobs that I'll do now, it still feels like it used to feel. It's not as much now, but it used to feel, and people might say I'm completely wrong, and so if I am, I apologize, but it used to feel like I would turn up to the job and the photography was almost like an aside to this big video production, and it shouldn't feel like that. Like, and I think that comes to, but I don't think that's down to, the client hasn't thought about the photography. I think it comes down to photographers applying pre-production heavily from the start. And like, for me, like, even on a stills job, I will still make a treatment. Even on a stills job, I'll still make a treatment, and I'll still make mood boards, and I'll still make, even on like the smaller things. Whereas back in the day, that's something that I've transferred over from motion on stills. Whereas back in the day, I never did that. It was just sort of, like I say, would just sort of wing it a lot of the time.
Do you think also there's a big part of clients going, oh, we can save on a bit of cost here. Let's get the stills in on the same day, and then they could just drop out for a few minutes. You know, they grab the talent from here, and you know, I've done huge numbers of jobs like that. It feels like it's becoming very, very, very common.
Yeah, I think so. And I think like when we have photographers on our jobs now, I make a very active effort. Like if I'm bringing someone on as a photographer to shoot a job, they get as much time as we get, and their craft is as important as ours. So if we're booking a photographer, like I treat them with as much respect, because they're as important as everyone else in the crew. Whereas I think maybe, and again, I might be wrong, but a lot of other production companies might not do that because they've come up through a different system, and photography does to them feel like a bit of an aside because it has on a lot of other jobs. So yeah, I don't know. I think it's a systematic thing, but I think it's a thing that photographers could fix themselves, could sort by just applying themselves a lot more in the pre-production stage. But again, like that a lot of people might, like you guys are probably, I don't know, do you do a lot of pre-production on jobs, or?
It's job dependent, I think.
I feel like I do a lot more now than I ever used to in terms of, because you come to the realization that actually the more prepared you are, the more likely you are to get the thing that you want out of a situation. And it really depends on editorial jobs. You might not have the time or the information to even do much pre-production. You can research stuff, but quite often there's so many unknowns. But in those situations, you know, I've done portrait jobs where I've actually pre-lit 5 different scenarios using computer 3D software and turned up knowing with all of the lighting diagrams printed out that I can give to my assistant, because I know I've got 20 minutes with that person and I want to get 5 different looks out of it. And that's a game changer, because suddenly those hours that I've put in, sat in front of my computer in the studio, kind of creating the kind of mood board for myself, allows me to get the type of pictures that I want to get out of that situation. But of course, there's still unknown variables, because you turn up and suddenly the person's like, no, I'm not wearing that today, or I'm not doing that today, or whatever. I think with moving image, because it's so much more complicated in terms of so many moving parts, there has to be more pre-production, because otherwise it would just be an utter shit show. You wouldn't get anything done. You can't make good moving image just like turning up and winging it, unless you're doing real documentary stuff, then maybe. But I think aside from that, you just fall flat on your face.
No, 100%.
So the people that don't put the work in would probably just be out of business because no one would hire them. Whereas in photography, it's probably a little easier because there's less moving parts to get away with it. And so there are more people who do get away with it on a regular basis, and therefore a bit more slack with their pre-production.
I mean, in the photography, in the motion world, I mean, on the bigger stuff, we will have like an AD, a first AD, a second AD, and their job is to basically, I'll sit down with them beforehand and we'll work together on a schedule of how we'll attack the day, and their job is to help you get through and make sure that you're keeping schedule, you're getting all the stuff right. If we need to drop, they'll also help us decide, like, okay, we're a bit behind here, but we can make the time up. The schedule's sort of really strict and regimented. Well, my set is anyway. And we can sort of say, like, we're a little bit behind here. Okay, we could probably drop this shot, or we could get these together and we can sort of shoot them back to back. And having a good AD is really good on set. But on the smaller, on the smaller stuff, we still have, even on the smaller stuff, when we're rocking around with like an agile sort of 3-man crew, which we do a lot. We will still have a strict sort of schedule, and I'll go with the DP, and we will block out shots and have it really clear in our head that, okay, so say like a Dr. Martin's job, although that looks very docu and straightforward, the stuff that we've done for them, every shot that's in there, we've gone and scouted every single bit, and we've sort of grabbed frames and then we'll use, I don't know if you've got the app Artemis. So there's an app, we use Artemis, and we'll know exactly what focal length we're going to be on, where we're going to be, the angle and whatnot, and just get it really clear. And for me, that's like, I'm very, very thorough too thorough in everything that I do, even down to like I have to read it takes so long on a lot of things because I just want to make sure it's right and I don't want to do it again. Like it was the same thing that I was always taught by my dad, like measure twice and cut once, and I still apply that. I still apply that to my professional work.
With you've mentioned Artemis, have there been other things, other apps, other systems, or anything like that you've found that help your pre-production? So when you're doing, you mentioned your treatments. So I used to find treatments a real pain in the ass because I would sit down and I'd be like, oh, great, I've got to do this treatment from scratch. But then I spent a bit of time and I use Affinity Publisher, but loads of people use InDesign or Keynote and stuff like that. And then I was creating kind of like a treatment layout. So now when I do a treatment, I can do a treatment in half an hour. I know where all the images are. I've got this treatment template that I just drop everything into and then write the correct bit of text. And then that saves, treatments done in half an hour, whereas I used to spend a full day on it. Have you kind of got templates and stuff like that set up, or do you?
No, on treatments, we discussed having a sort of having a template set, but do you know what? We get told so many times that we win jobs a lot of the time off the back of our treatment because it looks good. We'll speak their message. We'll speak their language, and a lot of the time. So all of our treatments are bespoke, and it takes, like you say, it's a lot longer. But for me, the treatment is a really important tool because that is the foundation of what everything else is built off. And so from day one, like I want to make sure that I'm going down the right route. So for me, I actually spend a lot of time on the treatments. Myself and Josh at EI will sit down and basically my process is we will both go away and write tons of copy of what we think and whatnot, and Josh's will be more on the technical side of things, and then mine's more on like the creative, and just a brain dump of lots and lots of stuff, and then I go through and tighten that up and go through it a few times, strip it right down to its essence, then go onto the visuals and just do like a trawl for reference imagery. And I've always had like a pretty good memory. Like I can basically remember where in a book I've read a certain part of something. So like when I was doing my dissertation, I would highlight stuff, but I never made note of the page numbers or not, because weirdly, and I don't know how, but I can sort of always remember where things are. So like photography and photographers, like I can always hark back to like, say like that Bernardo's campaign. I know when I saw that when I was like 16, I know it was shot by Nick Giorgio, and I know that it said like John Donaldson 23. I've in no way got a photographic memory at all, but I remember, that photographer, like, Ollie Burns' style would be really good for this. Let's go have a look at that. And I'll go and look like to his website and whatnot. And I mean, there are things that we do use to streamline. And there's like the secret sauce that I will share, but I would love to keep to myself so everyone doesn't use it. But there's a website which I've been using recently called Shot Deck. And I don't know if you guys have seen it, but you sign up to Shot Deck.
I've heard of it.
Yeah, and you can basically go on and type in like eye, and you type in, you're like looking for a shot of an eye to go into a treatment, and it will literally search for all, but they're all stills taken from like amazing films, like beautiful cinematic films.
Oh, cool.
And it's not like going on Getty and typing eye and you just get like loads of awful, disgusting, be like some clown like rubbing his eyes or something. Like Shot Deck's amazing for that, because you can also search, like you can even search like composition, so you can be like center frame, back of car, like those things, and then it'll bring up all these shots where the guy's sat in the middle seat of the back seat of a car, and that's exactly what I need for that. So like you can take that and build, and so there's things like that I use to streamline it, but generally everything's done quite bespoke, and because, like I say, we get a lot of work off the back of the treatments.
And so that's in terms of kind of your pre-production. That's kind of what you used. What do you use for kind of keeping the business kind of running? In terms of, do you have any CRMs that you use, or are you old school and you use spreadsheets? What's your kind of take on that?
We are pretty old school, to be fair, like super old school. So I don't particularly like automation and things that do stuff for me and help out. And again, this is probably the worst thing to do, but for my process, I like to, and luckily, like a lot of the other guys, we've tried other things, but we still use Google Drive, and we keep track of everything in Google Drive, and we use spreadsheets. And I think that comes from, especially like if you're working on a project and you're bringing in a producer or an executive producer from somewhere, everyone knows how to, you don't have to spend, like for us as a business, we don't have to spend time showing someone a system.
Sure.
Everyone knows how to use a spreadsheet. Everyone knows how to use it. So like on a job, we'll basically from day one, we'll make a to-do list, and we'll have like, and that will obviously grow, but we'll have like all the main things we need to tick off, and then we'll have like a to do, like in action, so another column and we basically go through it until all the columns are lit green, like that job is not complete, or that person is not booked, or that is not confirmed, or anything like that. Like we haven't had the contract signed or anything like that, but we have. And it's sort of a foolproof system, so that you can have like 5 different people all working on the same job, and we're all looking at the same thing, and there's not anything sort of missed. And it's just a bit of an old school way of doing it, but it works for us. So,
do you write people's names in the coloured squares to know who's assigned to which task?
Yeah. So you'll basically put like Adam's, like it'll be like a job to do, and then next to it will be like the person's task, and it'll be like Adam or Josh or team, and that's anyone, or Andy and like Max and whatnot, and it will be all these different people's roles are in there, and everyone knows their sort of their role. But on like a bigger production, it is very much all hands on deck, and everyone get in and get stuck in, and like, oh, I've seen that job hasn't been done, so I'll just quickly jump on that.
With that's quite a cool system, because obviously, whilst it's basic, it works. When you guys do get the bigger productions in, that also means you can expand and contract kind of as necessary. So you're not having to suddenly hire in 20 people full time and then train them up on a new system. You're bringing in freelancers who know how spreadsheets work. You just give them access to the thing you need them to be able to work on. And obviously that makes you guys as a small production company incredibly flexible, right?
Yeah, 100%. And it also means that all of our clients, all the agencies, they all work on Google Drive. So they all have, so you can also like merge the two systems together. So say like on the PlayStation job, we will start to merge different spreadsheets for different parts, and it's like we can work it that way. So it's a far more collaborative, and it's easier than having a specific system put in place, which we sort of found slowed us down.
Yeah, makes sense. Very nice. Going back to your shift from going from someone on the tools to effectively the top dog director, do you miss the being on the tools? I know you said every now and then you kind of grab the kind of the camera and stuff, but do you miss it?
I'm just laughing at your top dog director. I don't feel like that. Do I miss being on the tools? Yeah. Do you know what? Sorry if you can hear the baby crying in the background. I was. Yeah, I really do. And do you know what? This year, I've made an active effort. Well, I'm making an active effort at the minute to fall back in love with stills, and I miss that aspect, and I miss always carrying a camera and having that. And so yes, yeah. In answer to your question, yeah, I do miss being on the tools, but I also enjoy not having to carry the big fucking heavy bag everywhere. And my back is not grateful for it. But yeah, no, I mean, like, even though I'll not be on the tools and be the director, which on set it's the most senior position on set, and but it's still, I'm still happy, and I love getting in the trenches, right? And I don't think, in fact, no, I take that back. It's not the most senior position on the set, but it's like, as the director, you're bringing all these people together. But I still think that the everyone's role is as important as mine. Without that, none of it would happen.
Sure.
But yeah, still trying to fall back in love with stills as well and shoot more.
Yeah, oh, that's good. I mean, no one enjoys dragging all the bags about.
Do you know what it was? It was, I got so desensitized to it, carrying these like hunks of camera, like carrying these utilitarian cameras, and I'd go on holiday and I'd always take the f-stop bag with like 24-70, 16-35, 7200, and we'd go out on like, so we went, like, when we were on honeymoon a couple of years ago, and went out on this boat, and I'm like changing lens to shoot these shots of this humpback tail, which is like literally like the little blip that you'll see of this. And I'm like, why am I doing this? This isn't what I love. And so yeah, but like going and buying like a smaller Fuji has like revolutionized everything. And just having a little point and shoot that I can walk around and not shooting everything on my phone has been a joy.
And what, I guess, the one other thing I wanted to quickly go back onto is the kind of the skill side of things, of what you've had to develop or learn from moving from photography. I mean, obviously we've already discussed how pre-production and that kind of thing, but you're managing a team. So I guess communication is something that's so much more important. I mean, it is important when you're a photographer, but you are basically quite often working with a much smaller team. So communication aside, is there anything else that you've really had to kind of develop as a skill, or you felt that you have developed, or you feel like you still need to develop?
Yeah, there's definitely a lot that I still need to develop. On a technical level, I needed to, in the early days, I needed to learn the tech specs, like the codecs, the frame rates, all of that, how that worked, and learning that from like a base level helped tenfold. Because you'd get, if someone came to you with a technical question and you could go back to them with the right answer, like instantly. If you're there sort of floundering, like, oh, what export settings do I need this to be at? And you're like, I don't know, and you don't know like what codecs do what. Then that the biggest change, a big change for me was, obviously I started shooting motion when like the 5D Mark II was like, everyone had the 5D Mark II, and I remember like when I first picked it up, and I said to this guy who was also shooting video, and I was like, dude, where's the autofocus? How do I autofocus on this? He was like, you don't. And I was like, what? What do you mean?
What?
And I hadn't, since shooting film, like I hadn't manual focused a camera. And so that was like a baptism of fire. And like that, now speaking to photographers, and people are like, oh, like people often ask like, oh, so how did you make the shift? And like the biggest thing for me was like, I always say to them, like, don't rely, because people are like, oh, the autofocus on these is so good now. I'm like, don't rely on autofocus. Like, still learn how to manually focus, because if you do step up into the bigger leagues and you do say get asked to DP a job or something, and they want you to use cine lenses, you're going to be pulling your own focus. Like it just is.
Well, hopefully, if it's that big a job, you might be able to persuade them to get focused.
100%, yeah, and 100%. But it's still, I don't know. For me, because of my early training in photography, like starting in film and just doing film, like at the first year at university, only shot film, never did anything else. And that, for me, it's like, I think it's really important to have strong foundations. So not just relying, because autofocus, we all know autofocus is great, but like it's not like the magic bullet. It doesn't fit every scenario. And especially if you've got people crossing frame and then your settings aren't right for that specific, and then you've got to go in and change that. It's quicker to just like fiddle it yourself and get it sorted. But and then skills that I did have I mean, a lot of that basically they're both industries. It's just capturing light, isn't it? It's simple in its simplest form, but they're so similar in certain ways, but so different in others, which is why I sort of had to separate myself, because what looks good in a still doesn't necessarily, in like a still image, doesn't necessarily convey in a narrative piece where you've got to cut all these different shots together. Like there's not that one shot of the guy with the windows blown in the background. Like, yeah, that looks amazing but that isn't going to make a 30-second piece. So you've got to have all the shots that sort of come together. And there was certain like technical aspects like that I would say learn from day one, such as like crossing the line, like learn what it means to cross the line. So when you're shooting video, making sure that you're always on the same side of the angle of frame, so that when you cut it, that people aren't jumping from the right hand side to the left hand side to the right hand side to the left hand side. Things like that. But skills that I did have were, and where I felt like I was well equipped was like the people skills. So working like you guys will know, like working as a portrait photographer and especially on like an editorial thing, like you said, you sometimes I would go in and we'd be expecting like an hour with someone and we'd get like 3 minutes, and you instantly, and that happens all the time. So you'd instantly have to like build a rapport with someone and instantly get them to work with you and see your vision in a really short time frame. And I managed to take that and apply that to motion, so that when we're working on, say, more of a docu piece, being able to put the subject instantly at ease. I mean, it's when you've got a crew of like 10 people behind the camera and you've got people running around and whatnot, it's pretty daunting especially for a lot of these people who haven't ever been in front of the camera, which is where I've sort of managed to weirdly get a bit of a niche, is shooting these narrative docu sort of branded pieces with people who aren't talent as such, so they're not used to being in front of the camera. They're everyday people, and being able to put them at ease and make them relaxed and get the right, especially when it comes down to recording a VO, if you've got 10 minutes with someone, to be able to instantly put them at ease and build a rapport. That skill was like one that I will forever be grateful to the baptism of fire that is portrait photography, because being able to transfer that, and I don't know, it might be the case. I felt like it was probably something I told myself. I felt like other people at the similar time in their career in motion, because they'd come up through the motion ranks rather than the stills, they hadn't. That's a skill they still had to learn, and so they'd get on set and take them a bit longer. Like I say, I might be wrong, but that's why I would tell myself to feel a bit more confident.
I completely agree. Do you know what's interesting? You say about having 3 minutes and stuff. Now, obviously, that is a skill that's quite hard to learn. Being able to make sure people feel like your best mate within 30 seconds. What I've really noticed since the whole COVID thing, I don't know if you've noticed, but there's a pandemic on. Since that's all kind of, I didn't realize how much of my emotion and how much of my subject's emotion and how much of a connection was just provided by the lower half of the face. So now I'm finding it slightly harder going when people turn up in masks. First thing I do when I'm about 60 feet away is I pull down the mask and be like, "Hi, it's me," just so they instantly know what I look like under the mask, and just try and break that barrier. And I understand. I totally, completely encourage mask wearing. I'm not suddenly, some crazy anti-vaxxer, but like, do you find that it is slightly harder to get that instant connection?
Yeah, it's also like, we are where we are, and it needs to happen. But it's also it feels like it's slowed down the process. Like it feels harder to to get that emotional connection to someone. I mean, it's so seeing that lower half of someone's face is so important. Like my mum lip reads, so like this for her is like a nightmare.
I was going to say she did lip read, not currently.
So she's so like, and I really feel for people who rely on that form, and it just goes to show how important expression is, especially in our job. Like, and if you're trying to get like in a VO, the little nuances of my reaction to someone's question, not being like, oh, that's amazing, keep going, like I'm not doing that behind the microphone, but with your facial expressions, like what we're doing now, we're engaging, we're signifying, okay, that's a good answer, like keep going down that route and whatnot. You just keep looking at me and going, Adam, no.
Imagine. Well, I mean, it's a funny thing because we've not met. Obviously, we've met digitally, but you can't see how big I am. And so people who know me, who are listening to this podcast, go, "Oh, I know where he's going with this." But I, throughout my life, have had to deal with a lot of quite unique problems in a way that I'm 6'6". I'm a big bloke, and I am. I used to play ice hockey. I used to be like a forward on the rugby team. Like I'm a big bloke. And so my skill is being able to put people at ease, realizing that they're in safe hands, but I'm not a scary guy. I've had old ladies cross the street to deliberately not walk past me. And that was before COVID. So like for me, the lower part of my face is not more important than for everyone else, but it was a real, I've become very, aware of how important it was for me to help break down that initial kind of, not fear, because fear, I would hate to think that anyone's fearful of me, but like, that kind of, that initial impression, I think people go, oh shit, he's a big guy, and for me, it's really been kind of it's been interesting. I don't know I'm sure other people have had it, but for me, it has been, hence me now pulling my mask down to let people know that I've got, wonky teeth and a big smile heading their way, rather than, just 6'6" of all dressed in black, scary looking dude. Not scary looking, not that scary looking. Used to be scary.
Terrifying. Utterly terrifying.
There's a reason we've only met once, Greg.
One other final question I'd like to ask really is whether or not you see, we touched on it very briefly when you're talking about kind of, off air, where you're talking about lighting and your move to kind of using a lot of LEDs. And obviously with camera bodies and mirrorless becoming smaller and lighter, it's kind of developed, and drones and whatever, it's really developed what small teams can produce. The type of production value that a film can have now would have cost tens, if not hundreds of thousands to produce 15, 20 years ago. Like shots that could only be done by a helicopter, or shots that could only be done by a Steadicam operator who'd been doing it for however many years and had a Steadicam rig that cost X amount of money. So much of that stuff has been kind of brought down in price. Do you see any kind of trends in the way that moving image is going, or what clients are wanting and stuff in terms of how's that then affected the way that people want stuff produced? Yeah,
I mean, we as a production company have always, how we feel that Explore Impossible differentiates ourselves to a lot of other setups is we have always prided ourselves on being like agile and small and effective. So like we will go to a job, and like those Dr. Martens jobs, we can go to them with a crew of 3 of us and come away with something that looks like it should have been shot by a lot more people. And I think like the trend is now that people want quicker content. It's more snackable, like more like little bits, rather than, well, what we're seeing is people rather than spending on a huge big campaign with tons of crew, clients know they can get just as good a product with a smaller team if they've got the right team. So people are searching out like small, agile, effective production houses, and that's not to say the big boys aren't always going to be around, because they are. But I personally, and I think this comes from a stills background, I personally hate being on a set where you've got people just stood around doing nothing. Like a guy's job is to just change the batteries. That is genuinely a really important role in a crew, but that person can be like, and just to be there with the clapperboard, that person can be far more effective. And I want crew members that are far more effective on set and can get a lot more. So when I said earlier on, like, we're all very good at doing different jobs, that's because that's the way we've set the company up. So we can all, like, basically, if needs be, the cards on the table, I needed to record the VO. I know how I will record the VO in a shitty hotel room where we've put up 2 mattresses next to the guy and like blankets over the top and do it that way.
Oh, we've all made VO forts.
So like I think the trend is that everyone wants stuff so much quicker. It was funny, like when I just moved house recently, so I was clearing out my office at home, and was finding all these old DVDs that I'd
what are you saying about VOs?
all these old DVDs. You can cut that bit out. I found all these old DVDs and whatnot, and I was saying so my wife's a retoucher, and we were saying, like, back in the day, and I say back in the day, back like 9 years ago, like 10 years ago, we were like, I would do an edit in a day, like a stills edit in a day, and then burn that onto a disc and send the disc in the post to the client. That was my day of work done for me, where along with all the other bits that are involved. But then, like, now it feels like people want that edit as I leave set. Like, they want it like super quick, and everyone wants everything yesterday. And so I think, like, that is, it depends how you look at it. It's a strength and negative, because it's a positive and a negative, because you can look at it like, oh, I can get way more done in a day, or we can be, as a company, we can get a lot more jobs in a short period of time. But it's also, I always make sure that the work's not suffering, and therefore, like, when we schedule everything, we make sure that we schedule it all correctly, so we've got time, and we make time that way. But I think the trend is that, for me, like, everyone wants everything so much quicker, and it's just making sure that you can look at that and manage client expectations that way, and just and push back and say, and be honest and say, like, you pushing us to hit this deadline will is that, like, what is the reason for it? And if they say to us, like, oh, there's a reason because it has to go to this person who has to sign it off and they can only work on this day, then it's like, okay, fine, I get that. But what happens to all of us is when someone says, I need it by this date, you send them it, and then it doesn't go out for like 3 or 4 months, and you're like, why are we?
The link doesn't even get clicked. I mean, I think quite often, as long as you can, I mean, I've had similar things, and I think you have to be quite upfront with clients to say, listen, we can meet, deadlines that you're putting in place, but there might be cost implications in terms of, if you actually want us to do that 14-hour workday, then you're going to have to budget in overtime for the assistants and for the crew, and things like that. I think it's, as long as you are, I think where people become unstuck is where they agree to everything, and then suddenly they start to lose money because of it, or they start to make a loss because their crew are turning around and are saying, actually, I need overtime because the shoot's gone over, or you're asking me to work overnight on getting this edit finished, therefore that's overtime and time and a half. I think as long as you can kind of manage expectations financially as well, and I think that things should be met, but there needs to be adequate compensation when that's required. And quite often, if in those situations you explain to them why it costs that much, more to do it, within a 24-hour period or 24-hour turnaround or whatever, it suddenly magically appears that they don't actually need it done that quickly.
Yeah, that's happened.
Yeah, funny that.
Yeah, that happens a lot. And you say, okay, yeah, why is this so much more expensive than like the other quote, which was for a similar job? And it's like, well, the deadline's a lot quicker. Oh, right. Well, actually, we could probably shift that by a week or two.
Yeah.
I think my least favorite thing is when people go, "Oh my God, I really need that urgently." Whatever you can do to get it to me, and I've got servers I can dial into and all that. But sometimes I'll have to run back to the office, quickly do something on the file, and then send it, and then it won't be downloaded for a week. I think as freelancers, our definition of urgent is, "Oh my God, I must get this done, or I won't get paid." Whereas I think some people maybe we go, well, it's urgent. And that means like any time in the next 2 weeks.
Yeah, 100%. I think like as a side to this, you were saying about trends, a positive trend, I think, is that we're seeing less and less influencers and less influencer-based content. And I only bring that up because I've got to be careful what I say.
No, you don't.
No, but there's been times where I was on a job not so long ago for an outdoors brand, and we were with these influencers, and one of them came up to me and she was like, "Can you send us shots of what we were doing? I need them like now for my Instagram." And it was like pouring with rain. We'd been out there all day. It was horrendous, and it was just time to go, and that wasn't on the brief. Like that was not part of the job. Sending these guys like shots, like, and so it wouldn't it wouldn't have got done anyway. But I was just thinking, I would rather shit in my hands and clap right now than give you these shots because you need them instantly for your personal Instagram. Yeah, not my.
I do think these lockdowns have been kind of a bit eye-opening. I think people have gone, do you know what? I'm a bit over the whole influencer thing. Like I think with lockdown, especially with the guys who've gone to Dubai and stuff, I think a lot of people have gone, maybe that's not the best kind of avenue or the best person to include. So I wonder if we'll see less kind of branded content with influencers in it.
Can I just say, I think we've found the title for this episode. It's going to be Adam De Silva and shitting in your hands and clapping with Adam De Silva. That's such a great expression.
I love it.
Full disclosure, I'm actually in Dubai right now. This is,
are you? Yeah, right. Oh, yeah, well. But you're posting pictures of you from your garden from a few months ago.
Yeah, that's what it is.
Oh, dear.
Sensible.
But one thing I would say, and obviously coming on this podcast, one thing I would say is so many photographers, and like I speak to people quite a lot. Like I spoke to a guy, a photographer who reached out the other day, and it was really, I love it. He just sent me a message and was like, "Hey, I want to get into more motion stuff. Like I like what you're doing. Can you just offer me some advice? Because I know that you were a photographer once." And I would genuinely say, like everyone that I speak to who's been in that role, and they just say, "Oh, I want to do video, but I don't know how to do this," or it just feels really overwhelming. And like what we've been talking about today, about all the production and all the crew and all this, it doesn't need to be that. And genuinely, like, just fucking go for it. Like, don't be afraid of not knowing how to do it. And don't be afraid to reach out to people who do and ask for advice. So that's like I've found in the past few months, it's so insular, the world that we all work in, this creative world, and everyone protected. And you think everyone's protective of all their own things, but we're working on a short at the minute. And I just wanted some advice on casting. So basically, I just reached out to this amazing director who is like multiple BAFTA nominated, and just basically said, "Oh, with casting, could you just offer me some advice on like the best route for this project to take?" And they came back with such an array and such an amazing insight, and it made me think like, why haven't I been, and this was like a while back, and I was like, why haven't I been doing this more? So now, like, if I did, like, there was a problem with a job recently, a little while back, and I reached out to a director and said, have you ever had this happen? And he was like, yeah, absolutely, this has happened, and this is what I did to combat it. And I think just what's been great about this lockdown and about the positive I'm going to take out of COVID is just being able to talk, opening up and talking to other people within our industry, whether it's like photographers, sounds people, actors, and just being forthcoming. But the one thing I wanted to like get in is that, like, don't let I've got to pull my own focus, don't let that put you off or any of that. Just do it.
So I got 3 points from that. So I'm gonna blitz through them real quick. Number one, I'm a huge advocate of reaching out to people and asking for advice. And following into that, now the reason, interestingly, the way you said it, skip back a few seconds and listen to how Adam says, about the questions. You're not getting in touch going, hi, you've gone, right, here's a good question. Like when I get questions in my inbox, or if I get a phone call being like, hey mate, look, have you had this? I love a well-formatted, good, detailed question, because I can go, well, that's not open-ended. This is, you are after actual advice. When you get in touch with people and go, oh, hello mate, have you got any advice about moving image? That's like what is it you want to know? Like that, Google it first and then come to me with some proper questions. Because like when you've just said that, you reached out to the director and you say, oh, this is the issue, have you ever had it? Well, of course the question is, well, yes, I have had it, and this is how I solved it. If you go into him and go, hello mate, and then here's just some open-ended question that he can't possibly answer. I get it all the time, actually less in lockdown, but before I used to have it with students all the time. And it'd be like, here's a completely open-ended question that I could write, I could write a dissertation on it. What exactly? I don't have any time. People don't have time. Even during all this, they don't have time. So if you can go to people with a really succinct question, you're way more likely to get an answer.
It's also about approach though, isn't it? I mean, some people will just ask the question and be like, okay, thanks. And you're like, yeah, I've just spent, half an hour writing that email back to you with like knowledge that's taken me 15 years to learn. And you've just gone, cool, thanks.
I tell you what though, Greg, at least you get a response.
It's true.
So one of the reasons I now have, I have a generic reply that goes out to most people who email me in, and it's not because I don't want to answer them. It's because over the years, I've answered so many of them, and actually very few have come back to me.
Yeah, that is one of those things. It's, I don't know. Do you find that, like, apart from with this guy reaching out, I guess communication is so different now with lockdown as well. Like the very fact that we're having this conversation and conducting a podcast entirely virtually is a game changer. And now, as you did there with that PlayStation ad, the fact that you are directing something entirely remotely. I mean, things aren't going to go back to normal necessarily because they're fundamentally going to be changed because we can now do things that we couldn't do before.
Oh, 100%. Like, it's completely different. I was chatting to someone yesterday about like how London's going to change, and and it's going to be a completely different vibe. And I think it's weird because you can, in some senses, I think we've been more collaborative on projects because when you are together, you really value that time. So when you're on a video call together, you really value that time. So every day we start our day at EI with a group video call, and everyone goes through sort of what their day looks like and what we need to do or what we haven't done and whatnot. And when we were in the office and everyone was there, like, that happened, but like almost subconscious. It didn't really happen. We didn't set out, oh, this is our morning meeting every time. It just wasn't the vibe that we purposefully avoided. We were like, oh, we don't want it. We don't want to be too official and cool, man. So we didn't. But I think like having that structure and communication and talk, and just being open and talking to people. And also, yeah, I think I'm rambling on a tangent, but just reaching out.
Good.
And
do you think people's productivity as a result of having to schedule Zoom calls and stuff, do you think people's productivity has gone up? Because I know when people were worried about working from home, a lot of big companies are like, I don't know, people's productivity, they might be in their pajamas a lot. But for me, I've been working from home my entire career, so I've always felt quite productive. But I've got the feeling that from all the people I've been meeting on Zooms and stuff, that they're quite enjoying how much work they can get done because they're able to focus. Say for example, they got a morning of Zooms, but then the afternoon's completely free, and they're like, right, instead of getting interrupted by people at the desk, I can just get on with my stuff. On the flip side of that, there's obviously a huge amount of spontaneity that's missing, because instead, if we three were in an office, I'd be like, just go and ask Greg that. Whereas now I'd be like, hello, Greg, can I please schedule a Zoom? There's a lot of spontaneity that's kind of gone from just popping over and seeing people.
Yeah, I think productivity is a hard one, because I think like when you do have that time together and you are on a Zoom or a G Meet or whatever, like you have to make the most of that time. So you get everything into that. But I worry that sometimes you go into agencies and agencies will have meetings for the sake of meetings sometimes, or just companies will have meetings for the sake of, we'll have a meeting about the next meeting. And I think finding time to, I don't know. I don't know the answer. I think productivity, yes and no in equal measure.
I mean, how do you quantify it?
Exactly. I think yes, because people squeeze in what they can, but no, because for me, I love working from home, and I still do it a lot, but I miss the office because when I went to the office, I could fully focus, and I didn't have my wife popping in and saying, "Oh, could you just watch Ellen for 5 minutes? I just need to nip out and do something." And it's like that 5 minutes, just that takes me out for 10 minutes of my mindset. And then, in some ways it's positive and in some ways it's negative.
Well, I mean, it's a good place to start to wrap things up. Obviously, one thing we always ask our guests before they go is their Desert Island camera and their Desert Island photo book. Now, I can't remember if we prepped you for this.
No, I don't think we did. Right. So let's go.
So what we always ask our guests is like, try and pick a book that you really, really enjoy, like a photo book that gives you joy, or if you've seen over the years that's really kind of influenced you or changed the way you think about things, and then a camera, which is a lot easier because you can pretty much say anything. We can't really argue with you.
If you want to start with the camera, that's probably the easier bit.
I mean, photo book, I would have to say.
Adam's quickly looking up top 10 photo books that make you sound like an intellectual.
Well, I'll buy you some time. My wife very kindly. I was going to say, my wife very kindly bought me Helmut Newton's workbook for Valentine's Day.
No, do you know what?
Awesome. I
actually just tidied up the office and I put away the Gregory Crewdson Beneath the Roses, and that's still every time I look at it, I go, "Oh my god, that is stunning." But that isn't. But and it fires me up to be like, "Oh my god, look at what you can do!" That is like incredible.
It's interesting because it's so cinematic. It's so cinematic. So that obviously that speaks to you, especially now, I guess.
But my all-time, the one book I would take purely because it meant so much to me as like a young up-and-coming photographer, was basically anything from like Walker Evans and Dorothea Lange's like FSA photography, but Robert Frank's The Americans would be like my
good shout.
Robert Frank The Americans would be my all-time. I would take that because I could never get bored of looking at those images. Like they're just
nice
and honest and real and stunning.
I have an edition which has got a kind of a dissection. I can't remember who wrote it. It's over there on the shelf, but it's just out of sight. And it is amazing because it's not only all of the work, but then it's kind of all of the notes and letters and kind of contact sheets and extra stuff. And it's just such a gem to dive into. Like, it's such an indulgent thing to kind of sit there and just kind of get lost in the work, which is great.
Yeah.
So what's your camera then?
Camera. Do you know what? Mine's really, really boring, I'd have to say. Mine would simply be because it was such a workhorse, and it did, like, I put it down earlier when I was like, utilitarian gear, but like a 5D Mark, a 5D Mark III, I think I'll forever love that camera, and like for so many reasons, ergonomically, I would love to say something like a Mamiya or a Hasselblad or something like more arty, but no. Or I think I'd have to go. Just being honest, that camera, I had some real
special moments with it.
Yeah.
Continue to have special moments with it. What you do with the camera is entirely up to you on the island.
Yeah. No. On that note,
yes,
I think we should end it.
Well, look, Adam, thank you so much for coming on the show. Really, really appreciate it. I thought that was an awesome chat. So really appreciate you taking the time.
No, thank you.
All right.
I hope I didn't ramble too much.
No, you were great.
This was great. Cheers, Adam.
Thanks, guys.
Right. Well, thanks for listening to this latest episode, guys. If you want to get in touch with the show, there are a myriad of ways to reach out to us. You can follow us on Instagram at xnegative. You can email us at info@exposenegative.com. And the website is exposenegative.com. We are also on Twitter at exposenegative. And personally, you can follow us if you really want to stalk people. We are at Greg Fennell and at tombarnes.com. And that is words.com, not symbols. Thank you. Bye.